Dear friends, some 5 weeks ago, I filed a very detailed, that is more than 160 pages long, criminal complaint with the equivalent of the U.S. Attorney General here in Germany. This criminal complaint accuses the presiding judge in my case, 2 prosecutors, the directors of the Rostov prison, where I was jailed up until the end of April of this year, the medical director of that facility, the agent who orchestrated my kidnapping in Mexico, that is the agent of what is the equivalent of the FBI, and of course the 3 Berlin attorneys turned agents for the German Domestic Intelligence Service of very serious felonies. It accuses them, among other things, of kidnapping, torture, false or criminal imprisonment, and many other crimes. However, we did not just file this criminal complaint, but I also published it. And I did this both in English and in German. Meanwhile, this complaint has been shared hundreds of thousands of times. This is perfectly fine and legal, as the situation which I describe in that complaint and in which I now find myself because of these crimes is one of self-defense, which, by the way, corresponds with defense of others. And in such a situation or predicament, anything that gets you out of this so-called actual, ongoing, and illegal situation, I'm quoting from the German criminal code, in such a situation, anything that gets you out of this is, in fact, justified. Now, instead of resorting to violence, we decided to beat them at their own game, and I simply published that complaint, whose 4 or 5 most important aspects I will explain verbally over the next couple of days, so that those of you who want to hear this in order to better understand the legal writing will be able to do so. My verbal statements will also include a detailed legal analysis by a Polish human rights entity. This is perfectly written, a detailed legal analysis of why the 6 months of torture that I was subjected to and also my ongoing pretrial detention constitutes crimes or amount to crimes against humanity, not just under the German Constitution, but also under both the EU's and the United Nations Charter of Human Rights. And that by trying to justify this torture, by resorting to lies and more fake accusations, the prison officials and the judge only dug their own graves even deeper. 6 feet under is now probably 60,000 feet under in their cases. Now, normally you would expect that people whose identities and whose crimes are publicly exposed, or to use their newspeak language, who are publicly defamed in such an explosive manner, would immediately file for a preliminary injunction, or what's basically the same, a TRO, that's a temporary restraining order, which can be issued by a court by way of a summary proceeding without a full trial to stop people from, for example, defaming others. Strangely enough, however, this didn't happen. Even though every single one of the accused perpetrators of the crimes I detail in my criminal complaint is acutely aware that they must immediately move for such a preliminary injunction, they didn't do it. Why? We can only guess, but my guess is that they either know the law or someone explained to them that in order to get such very quick but only temporary relief, they would have to also file affidavits together with such a motion for preliminary relief. Affidavits through which they would have to swear under penalty of perjury that all of my accusations are false. Now, since temporary restraining orders or preliminary injunctions are almost always followed by a full trial in which then all of the evidence is presented, that is, all of the witnesses are going to be heard, there is a very real and very high risk of such an affidavit turning out to be false, thereby exposing the signatories of such false affidavits to very, very serious punishment for perjury, of course. At any rate, false affidavit or not, perjury or not, it is now too late to file for preliminary injunction. As according to German law, this must happen immediately, that is within a couple of weeks. 5 weeks is far too long under the circumstances, as speed is of the essence if you claim that you immediately require a quick preliminary injunction without a full trial. They are all of them fully aware of the self-made predicament of theirs. In fact, the author of the lying criminal complaint against me, which started it all, finally, after having hidden behind fake identities for many, many months, has now exposed himself to the director, in one sense of the word, to the director of my new hotel in Bremerförde by sending him a letter under his full real name demanding that he, the director of this establishment, deny me my right to free speech because, as he also elaborates in that letter, he doesn't want to go to the trouble of filing for a preliminary injunction against me. Well, it's too late and too dangerous for him to do that now anyway. But what can they do now? Do they have any viable option left? No, they do not. They could, of course, go for a full criminal or civil trial against me, either for criminal or civil defamation, but that would give me exactly what the monsters and their puppets have been desperately trying to avoid ever since they had Judge Schindler first exchange the facts of my fake case from illegal loans to violation of a secret agreement, and then effectively shut the trial down by denying the defense the right to refute these new, blatantly insane allegations by refusing any of the witnesses we called. A full public trial, regardless of it being a criminal or a civil trial, would give me the opportunity to get all those witnesses heard, exposing the court and the prosecution as what they are, low-life criminals who do the bidding of even lower-life monsters, criminals to take me down for political reasons, namely to stop me from making sure that there will be a worldwide legal reckoning for what happened during the pandemic. But what's even worse, from their perspective at least, is this. As the German and international public will learn over the coming weeks, more and more of the roughly 20% of the German judges and prosecutors who are utterly disgusted with the totally corrupt legal system are now willing to speak up even as witnesses in several upcoming trials. They too have had it and have decided to no longer remain silent for fear of losing their jobs. The people throughout Europe, not just in Germany, but also in France and in England and all the other European countries, now know that they can neither trust their corrupt legislatures nor their even more corrupt executive branches. In fact, France's government has just collapsed for, I believe, the 7th time. And they have also realized that democracy's last line of defense, the judiciary, the legal system, can no longer be trusted either. This became especially obvious in Göttingen when a couple of days ago, the murder of a 16-year-old girl by an asylum seeker whose request for asylum had been denied already 3 years ago and who had led the police to the dead victim's body. He had pushed the girl under a train. That this crime was covered up, this murder was covered up by the police and the DA's office, letting the killer go and publicly claiming that her death was a tragic accident and then a suicide. This came out when the grandfather of the dead girl made it public. Now, this is the same legal venue that sends the people who expose such truth to jail. The monster's time is definitely up. They are now in a situation in which they are hoping that they would be between a rock and a hard place. And that would be a very comfortable spot to be compared with the no way out situation into which they, with our help of course, have maneuvered themselves. They miss the opportunity to stop me by way of a preliminary injunction. They cannot go for a full criminal or civil trial. For criminal, or civil defamation against me, as this would only expose and highlight their crimes even more. And now even the mainstream is on to them, as the latest work of art by Banksy shows. It depicts a demonstrator lying on the ground while a judge in his robe is beating him up with his gavel to keep him from making use of his right to free speech. I cannot imagine a better way of speaking truth to power and letting the monsters know that they can run but no longer hide from justice. Stay tuned. There's much, much more to come. I'll see you soon.